Hey gang, Ronan here. Welcome on back to the Cade and welcome to another edition, our first in a good long while, of Suckerpunch Sunday, the series we started back when we got this channel on the map in 2022, where we do a deep dive into fighting or fighting platform-based games from the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th generation. And this week, to bring it back, we're going all the way back to 1994/95, and we're going to highlight not only a game that was extremely popular at the time, but it will be our first entree into one of the more short-lived and more maligned consoles of that generation. It is Virtua Fighter for the Sega Saturn. Now, this game was pretty much the flagship title for the console when it was released to Japanese and North American audiences in 1993-1994. Virtua Fighter also did come out on the 32X hardware edition for the Genesis, but as that one wasn't considered anywhere near as good as the Saturn version, I figured we will go with this one. Now, if you don't know the history of this game, it was created by Yu Suzuki as part of his big AM2 studio for Sega. And if the name Yu Suzuki is not familiar to you, and you know Sega, the two are almost synonymous with each other. If it wasn't for Yu Suzuki, a lot of the great initial titles that Sega had back in the arcade days of the 80s would likely not have come around. He helped create games like Space Harrier and Outrun and Afterburner, all these games that we know of today and really to a large extent take for granted, all came from the very fertile mind of Yu Suzuki. So what we're going to do over the course of the next 25 minutes or so is we're going to just try and get through this game. Now, it is set up where you have 8 characters, so it's not much different than any other conventional fighting game of the time. And I'm just going to go ahead and take a Kirayuki, because why not? And this is a game that I didn't really play that much outside the arcade. Now, one thing you have to bear in mind with the Saturn is that the controller had a D-pad. It did not have a... it didn't have a control stick. So I'm playing this on the Mednafen emulator, which was a kind of a tricky emulator to set up. But you have your basic attacks of punch and kick. You also have the ability to do different throws and combos, but they're a little bit harder to come by. And like most fighting games of the time, since you're on a standalone platform, and we saw this when we did Soul Blade, I think way back in episode 2 or 3. It's been a while. If you knock your opponent out of the ring, then that counts as a victory as well. Oh, we're getting the fireman's carry and the Samoan drop. But we're able to knock him down. Now, the significance about Virtua Fighter that cannot be overstated is while it wasn't the most popular game by comparison to Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and 3D games that would come along down the line, it is the first fully polygonal fighting game. It was the first one to be done truly in 3D and had polygon characters as opposed to working in 2D or 2.3D. And for a lot of us at the time, that was a big deal. Now, you can look at it today and say, well, what does it really matter? And I get that. With how the technology has evolved in the 30 years since this game came out, it stands to reason that not necessarily would be taken for granted, but it became the norm. And to the point where, you know, there's been a return more to 2D technology for a lot of games, including fighting games. I remember, Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, while they've adapted... Oh, double axe handle, that hurt. That was a coup de Gracie. While for a while, those two landmark franchises had 3D platforms for them. Oof, as I get throttled. They've gone back to a 2D style with kind of a 3D depth of field to allow them to move around, which is fine. If that's, I mean, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. If anything, I like the fact that they've evolved in that way. But for all of us who grew up at this time frame, and I was all of, 17 when this game came out, the idea that we had gone from 2D to 3D, like most things, was an exciting prospect. Oh, get the bionic elbow there. Bit of Death to Rhodes on that elbow. I always remember that Sarah was like, this is where the get good part of this game came into effect. Now, the one that you have to worry about is that because... Ooh, as I get knocked out of the ring, and that's it. There is no 3D control aspect, so if you go up, you're going to jump. If you go down, you're going to duck. So it's not a case of being able to move from side to side. I think I'm going to take somebody else this time. I will take Cage. Kagemaru. Why not? See if I do better with Kagemaru than I would with Akira. Although it looks like the attacks are all the same. Oh, I need that razor kick. Oh, instead I got a low kick right in the knee. That's going to be a torn ACL. Now, this game proved to be so popular that it spawned, and I did have to look this up to verify it, 6 flagship sequels up through Virtua Fighter 6, but there have been 23 different titles for under the Virtua Fighter banner. And they've been shown on various platforms. They've been released not just on the Saturn, they were put on the Dreamcast, they were transported over to the PS2 and the Xbox, as well as PCs, and oh man, I got crushed. And those platforms. So it is definitely one that has garnered a lot of longevity over the 30-year lifespan of it. And when it came out and was reviewed, I think we'll go with Wolf this time. It by and large received rave reviews, somewhere in the vicinity of 80 to 90% across the board, to high 90s. See if I can finally get by her really quick. Oh. Tried the lariat and did not pull it off. Oof. And she is quick out the blocks. Oh, the belly to belly. And she comes back with a quick 3-punch combination, and down goes Wolf. Now, according to GameSpot and 1UP, it is ranked as one of the most influential games of all time. Gamist Awards had it as the 3rd best game of the year for 1994, 3rd best fighting game, 6th best for graphics. At the AMOA Awards in 1994, it was a nominee for most played video game and most innovative new technology. And since then, EGM, 1UP, Famitsu, and Computer Gaming World have had it on their lists as one of the best fighting games of all time. Oh, and she jumped out after me, so we didn't even get the double out. Now, if you can manage to do it right, you can do kind of a stutter step. Instead, she pulls the belly to belly again. So we are having a real hard time getting by Sarah here.
Fight 1. Ready, go!
I think what I need to do is I need to stop being so aggressive and let her come to me. Except I'm not even getting that lucky. Oh, that time I finally got her. So it did so well in the arcades that the original Virtua Fighter sold more than 40,000 units worldwide by 1996. Now that may not seem like a lot, but when you're talking about arcade cabinets, 40,000 is a lot. Oh. Considering each unit cost around $15,000 to make, it quickly became Sega's best-selling arcade game ever, and not by a small amount. Ah! She came back with a 3-punch combo and put me down. And that total was surpassed only by Virtua Fighter 2. And when that happened in 1994, collectively they ended up surpassing the previous record holder, which was Outrun, that had set the mark in 1986.
Ready, go!
There we go. Now I think I'm getting the hang of it. Something you have to keep in mind is that if you hit the kick button with one side, you'll kick with your left leg. If you do it with your... Oh. And I went right over and she ended up just putting the complete kibosh on me. Oh, I think I got her now. Or at least I hope so. There we go. We finally get by her. Well, it took about, what, 8 minutes? But when Virtua Fighter premiered at the AM show in 1993, like, audiences were blown away by it. Which you look at it now, and obviously it's so simplistic by comparison to modern fighting games or even modern 3D games. Like, I was playing Elden Ring earlier today, and, I mean, we're talking the very model of chalk and cheese here. But that's not to say that for the time, when we were looking at the next potential successors to Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, along with things like Soul Calibur and Last Blade and the SNK Neo-Geo still cranking out King of Fighters cabinets that were selling pretty well. Let's see here. Who can I go with now? I'll take Sarah this time. That it didn't take too long for us to all of a sudden start thinking, okay, within 5 years... every game we're going to play is going to be with 3D polygons. And this really was the proof of concept that showed what we were in store for. And what I didn't know until I started doing research for this episode was that they got the technology Sega did in part by a partnership with Lockheed Martin, who is an aeronautics and military defense contractor. Man, Sarah's just not as fast when I'm using her as it is when the computer's using her. Oh, and then get the razor kick. Alright, well that didn't go nearly as well as I'd hoped. And the very first review for this game, when it came out in 1994, In Computer and Video Games magazine, Rick Skew said after playing 1 hour, he praised the graphics, the animation, and the camera work, but he compared the gameplay unfavorably to like Street Fighter 2, and I can see that. Because, again, Street Fighter 2 became the monolith that it was because it perfectly encapsulated everything you needed in a fighting game. The controls were kinetic enough and they were easy enough to follow that, unlike a game that we profiled in a WTF Wednesday Best of the Best Championship Karate, instead of programming in a gazillion different moves, all you had to worry about was a stick and being able to do heavy, medium, or light attacks, and that was it. And despite the graphic fidelity of this game and the vibrancy of it and the fact that you can move fairly three-dimensionally, it does not change the fact that because you have the D-pad instead of a control stick, at least on the Saturn version, it does make it harder to be able to navigate your way past each successive battle. But that doesn't necessarily make it a bad game. And the interesting thing, and it's something that... Oh! I need new ribs, please. In a lot of ways, this game got shown up as well when Sony came out with Tekken. When Namco released Tekken on the PlayStation 1, and we saw a similar style, but that ran at a better clip, and had graphics that were on par, but also had better functionality as far as gameplay physics and mechanics, then the Saturn was really put on the back foot, and Sega, to an extent, never really recovered from it. Sad to say. Which, as somebody who grew up having a sibling who had a Genesis, you know, I was there right at the peak of the 90s video game wars between Nintendo and Sega. And then Sega fell by the wayside after the PlayStation... Oh, DDT! I forgot you could pull the DDT in this game. And that Pi could pull it is even better. But yeah, once Sony came along and really knocked Sega off of its perch, and then was able to start coming out with systems that made it better than and more appealing to modern gamers than the Nintendo systems that were coming out, which were tailored more towards families, and I get that. Oh, now you have dueling pies. Oh, and I get the DDT. Perfect. Get the wrist flip, and that's it. I'm definitely going to need somebody else to get through this. Oh, she did it again. And the double knee strike. And two perfects. Okay, we definitely cannot use Pi against Pi. That's not going to work. Let's see who we can try now. Well, we'll go back to Sarah. We'll see if this works any better. The funny thing is that in 30 years of this game being around, I've never actually beaten it. Mainly because playing it in an arcade, I would run out of nickels or quarters depending on the arcade. Man, I just got throttled. I don't know what the Chinese word for beatdown is, but I just got it in spades. Oh, and the double knee drop. And the wrist flip. And the double knees to polish it off. Oh. Hello, my name is Pi. I will be your chiropractor today. I hope you don't need that spleen because you're not going to have it for long. Alright, let's see what we can do with Lao Chan.
Fight one. Ready, go!
Nope, went right over her. Ow. Oh, nice! Counter. Grab the leg, drop, and then double knee press. So, on the whole, the Saturn version of Virtua Fighter sold 630,000 units in Japan. And then they came out with a remix version of it later that year that sold an additional 450,000 units. And that was just in Japan. And at the end of the decade, Next Generation magazine, when they did their review of, or the recap of the 90s, they said that arguably Virtua Fighter is the most significant game of the decade.
Fight 1. Ready, go!
Oh, man, Pi is just... She is merciless. Chun-Li has got nothing on Pi.
2. Ready, go!
Oh! And the double knee strike, and the spin kick, and down we go. Alright, we'll try this one more time. The other thing that has to be taken into consideration with a game like this is that for the brutality that you see in the fights, it is also very, very tame. This is a game that you could play, you could let your kids play it. And whereas you don't have the graphicness of Mortal Kombat, and not to say that Street Fighter was overly violent. There we go, we get the Bulldog. Oh, get the double knee press again. And then she doubles up with a kick. But we're seeing all this stuff, and there is no blood, there's no breaks, there's nothing like that. So in that regard, it's very much like Tekken, where in Tekken, you had the flashes on impact, but it wasn't a game that somebody could watch you play it and be repulsed by what they saw. Now, again, I'm not saying this to dog on Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat was one of my favorite games of the 90s. Like it was for a lot of kids my age. It was a great alternative to Street Fighter at a time when we were growing into that part of life where you accept that the world could be a fairly brutal place. Well, if you watch somebody rip somebody's spine out, that kind of drives home the point. And I ring out again. Oh, tried the knee strike and instead got a combo, the double axe handle. Oh my god. She is just tearing through us. And if anything, that's a bit of the frustration with a game like this, is that the computer can run at a slightly faster speed than we can. Like my combos, as I'm trying to get them to fire off, aren't landing quite as quickly as hers are. And she does the wrist flip, and does that flip. And then the low spin kick, and down we go. Now, obviously, a fighting game like this is going to be fun if you're playing with a friend, because that's what these games are designed for than playing them single player. And I think as we're in 25 minutes, we're going to call it good here, because otherwise, I think I'm going to end up just being a whipping boy for Pi the rest of the way. But this is the original Virtua Fighter from 1994 for the Sega Saturn. And that's the thing I want to stress, is that for as short a lifetime as the Saturn had by comparison to the Genesis, and it was around about the same amount of time, if I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments, as the Dreamcast. But because the Saturn came out amidst the release of the PlayStation, which completely revolutionized the video game market in the 90s, or at least the mid to late 90s. And the N64, which also proved extremely popular, and rightly so, for the Nintendo. This was the sign that Sega was unfortunately on its way out. And despite that, they still had some really banging games on their consoles as they were leaving, which is part of the reason why I wanted to incorporate the Saturn and the Dreamcast into the retrocade once I was able to find emulators that would run those games. So again, to be able to play this, I'm using one called Mednafen, M-E-D-N-A-F-E-N. It's a free emulator, but it's a little hard to set up. So if you want to play Saturn games, and you can find them pretty much anywhere, and don't have access to a Saturn console, you can do it this way, and I would recommend highly that if you do so, go on YouTube and look up there's a million different videos, and thank God we live in the YouTube era that we can do this now, where people can show you how to set it up. And Mednafen actually works on various different emulation platforms for different consoles, including PCs. So keep that in mind if that's something you're looking to take advantage of. Is this a good game? For its time, yes, it was a revolutionary game. It was a game that showed people that now 3D graphics in this sort of design was possible, and it was going to be a harbinger of things to come as we turned the millennium and got into the 21st century. The interesting thing has been how it has scaled back in some regards, and we've gone away from these fully 3D sort of games for fighting games and gone back to, like I said, kind of an amalgam of 2D and 3D, which again, I have absolutely no problem with. I'm just fine with that. As long as I get a good fighting game that has a lot of kinetic action to it, a lot of character depth, and allows me to have fun with it, I'll take it any way I can get it. Is this a game you can make today? Easily. And because there have been more than 24 variations of this game that have come out over the years, the last version, I believe, came out earlier last year, was Virtua Fighter 3TB Online in the arcades. That came out, in 2023. But there was a PlayStation 4 version of Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown that came out in 2021. So, Sega, while they're not so versed in creating consoles anymore, there still is a big enough market for this series that they are coming out with variations and sequels every couple of years. So, if anything, leave me a comment down below. What's been your experience with Virtua Fighter? Was it a game? Was it a series that you liked? Was it one that you got a lot out of? Because I don't know a lot of people who had Saturns back in the day, and I don't know a lot of people who really got into this, again, by comparison to the stalwarts Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and so on. So, but that is Suckerpunch Sunday for this week. As always, if you've been enjoying the content, hit that like button, subscribe if you are new, and ring the bell to be notified of new episodes. We post new stuff every week, including WTF Wednesday, our one-day playthroughs, and Sports Saturday, which I hope you enjoyed yesterday, where we revisited ESPN College Hoops from 2003. I will let you know we are planning our next playthrough. It will not be a fantasy role-playing game, I'll tell you that right now. I'm glad you guys were able to tune in and follow us for our Dark Souls playthrough. That was a lot of fun to put together, but I am kind of, like I was with Sports Saturday and Suckerpunch Sunday, I am a little bit worn out from playing those kind of RPGs, so the next playthrough we do will be nothing of that sort. So we're kind of whittling down our options at this point, and then watch this space as I will let you know when those should be forthcoming. Be sure to follow us on social media through Instagram and Threads at Ronan's Retrocade. Help spread the word about us so we can continue to build this subscriber base and build this channel and make it bigger and better. We're always on the lookout for new games that people want to see, and if anything, we can always just give you an honest assessment of the game and highlight stuff that maybe it slipped through the cracks. I had somebody comment on when we did our one-day playthrough for the Bugs Bunny birthday blowout for the NES, which is now 35 years old, saying, this is my favorite game back in the day. So, we like that sort of interaction with you guys, and we want to keep that going. So, if there's a game that you like that you would like to see us feature from the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Super Nintendo, the Sega Master System, Sega Genesis, SNK Neo-Geo, Nintendo 64, Sega Saturn, Sega Dreamcast, PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2? Leave it in the comments below or drop me a line on social media. It can be any game from those consoles that you want. My name is Ronan. It's been great to spend this time with you. Be safe, be well, happy gaming, and we will talk to you again pretty soon. Bye.